This 3-inch performance leveling kit from Cognito Motorsports combines some of the best parts you can get to give your truck all the performance and height you want without compromise. Designed to fit 2020 and newer Silverado and Sierra 2500s and 3500s, this is the setup you want if you're looking for a high-quality lift and level kit that offers superior performance and control in all situations. Let's start out with the most important part, and that is tire fitment. With this kit installed, you will be able to fit up to a 35 by 12.5 inch tire on a 9-inch wide wheel without the need for any additional modifications. Getting some additional height on these heavy-duty GM trucks is rather straightforward thanks to their torsion bar suspension design. Included in the kit, you'll find a set of torsion bar keys for the front end and a pair of 1-inch lift blocks for the rear. So you get 3 inches of lift up front and 1 inch of additional height in the rear, which will give your truck a really even, level stance that's going to be quite a bit higher than it was from the factory. But additional height is made better by the inclusion of a full set of Fox 2.0 IFP shocks. And if you're familiar at all with Fox's suspension offerings, you'll know that these aren't just normal shocks. These are monotubes that utilize Fox's unique internal floating piston design. And that floating piston is designed to eliminate aeration in the oil, so you're not going to get any air bubbles working their way in and messing up the damping performance. Fox also tunes each shock for its specific application with specific valving and a high flow damping piston. So what does this all mean for you? In short, significantly better performance versus stock, as opposed to those stock dampers that are tuned for that stock ride height, but are also tuned more on the soft side for street driving. These are meant to perform both on the street and out on the trail. They're going to make the ride a bit more firm than stock, but you'll also get a lot more control over the way your truck handles, especially because you've got a match set front and rear with that application specific damping too. So it's going to ride and handle pretty much as good as it's going to get. Now, also included in the kit are a set of Cognito's SM series upper control arms. These feature an increased angle for the ball joint versus the ones on your stock arms that are pretty much perpendicular. Now that increased angle helps account for that 3 inches of lift and allows your suspension to retain its proper geometry. So you're not going to have any issues with binding, and you'll have all the articulation you need to go off-roading or overlanding. Those arms are made from boxed sheet metal and are all welded together for extra strength. The ball joints and bushings come pre-installed, and the ball joints have Zerk fittings, making them greasable for easy maintenance and a long life. The arms are also finished in this cool semi-gloss black powder coat as well to protect that material underneath against rust and corrosion. The shocks feature a 2-inch diameter body, and they are made from CNC machined 6061 T6 aluminum. Inside, you'll find that high-flow internal floating piston, redundant seals, and a 5/8 inch hard chrome-plated heat-treated alloy steel piston shaft. The mounting points also feature nitrile rubber bushings and sleeves included, and those too are made from anodized 6061 T6 aluminum. The torsion bar keys are made from forged steel, and the rear lift blocks are made from cast steel. Both are powder coated this nice semi-gloss black, pretty much the same thing you're going to find on the control arms. And the kit also comes with heavy-duty zinc-plated extended length U-bolts, probably the largest ones I've ever seen in a kit. Cognito clearly went into development with a focus on performance and durability, and it really shows because this is a very solid kit. Accordingly though, you're going to have to pay to get it. Pricing comes in at about $2,000. Now that does position this as a more premium offering, but if you want the best, again, you got to be willing to shell out. The combination of the Fox 2.0 IFP shocks and the Cognito SM series control arms is a real winner because of the build quality and the technology that's been built in. So if you want a lift level kit that's going to perform and last you a long time, it's worth looking around for the extra room in your budget to get this one. Installation gets a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and the job should take you around 4 hours to complete. This is designed to be a totally bolt-on operation, so you don't need to modify anything on the truck itself in order to get the parts fitted. This is going to take you some time though, and since you are lifting the front of your truck by cranking up those torsion bars, remember that you're going to need a professional alignment once you've got everything done. With that, let's head on out to the shop and we'll walk you through the installation process step by step.
For this install, you will need various impacts, various length extensions, a breaker bar, 27, 22, 21, and 19 millimeter wrenches, an 18 millimeter ratcheting wrench, a ratchet, a paint pen, a tape measure, a cutting tool, a torsion key tool, a 19 millimeter swivel socket, 27, 26, shallow and deep 24, 21, and 13 millimeter sockets, and a 3/8 to 1/2 inch adapter if necessary. Also not shown here is a bungee cord and a pole jack or a jack and jack stands. What's up guys, today we're going to be doing a lift kit on our Silverado, so let's get started. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to need to do is remove our factory torsion keys. So these are held in by some retainers and adjuster bolts, and we're going to need a tool to remove those. We'll pull that out in a second. The first thing you want to do is measure and mark where this adjuster bolt is sitting, because you want that to come back to the factory settings after we replace them. So we're going to take a double measurement. Essentially, we're going to grab our tape measure, measure the length of the bolt sticking out. We're also going to mark the threads with a paint pen just as a little bit of security. So factory spec is 1 3/4 inches. You want to write that down, and also you can mark your threads like so. And you want to do that for both keys. Our driver's side is at 1.5 inches. So our next step is going to be relieving the tension on our adjuster so we can get that out so that we can bring our key down fully and relieve the tension on our torsion bar itself. So there's a few different styles of torsion bar tools. Ours is kind of a U-bolt style. So what you want to do, no matter what, is wherever the top dowel is for your adjuster tool, there is a dowel locator at the top of your torsion bar support. You want to line that up, and we're going to get our tension bolt into our recessed portion of our key. You'll see all this in a minute. We'll slide this over. So now we've got our U-bolt and our dowel locator in on the top of our torsion support. We're gonna get our bottom section in. Again, this all depends on the style of torsion tool you have available to you. Admittedly, the C-clamp styles are easier to use. Now that we have this in, we're going to run our nuts in, as well as our adjuster screw. Just want it to touch that recess. So we're going to tighten these down just a bit, then we can add our tension. So now we're going to run these in flush. Ours use a 24mm socket. Again, yours may be different. Now we're going to take our 26mm socket on an impact and run this bolt up to push up on our key so we can remove our adjuster screw. Now once this is loose, you know the tension is off of it. You can remove it. Sometimes you can get it out by hand, sometimes you can't. Now we'll use our 21mm socket to remove this bolt. Once that bolt is out, you can slide your adjuster nut out. Then we'll come back and relieve the tension. Then we can undo our torsion tool. Sometimes these do get a little stuck on here. So now, as you can see, we do not have tension on our torsion bar anymore. So we're gonna need to push this forward out of the retainer section in the rear so we can get our key out. Now sometimes this will go by hand, sometimes you need to use persuasion. We'll see how this one goes. We're gonna slide our torsion bar forward. Now, as it comes forward, your key is going to release. You wanna make sure to have a hand there. Now we have our key out. Once you have this side out, you can do the same thing for the other side. So now we're going to install our new keys. Now you want to reference the position that your factory key came out. If you kept your torsion bar in the same spot, it's pretty easy to line this back up. So what we'll do, bring this up in a position. You want to be mindful of your fingers. Once you get that through enough, it's pretty much going to sit. You want to make sure this is all the way back seated where it was. Now we can reinstall our retainer and adjuster screw. So now we've got our tool reassembled. We've got our tension bolt lined up in the recess. Get this back to snug. Now that we have everything lined back up, we're going to tighten down our bolt and apply tension. We're going to grab our factory adjuster. Once you've got that back in and centered, reinstall our adjuster screw. We'll run that back in again with our 21 mil socket. You don't want to use a power tool with this. You don't want to chance messing up your threads. Once you've got this in a good bit, we can now release the tension because our adjuster is going to hold in place, and we can adjust our screw back to the OEM measurement. As you can see, that's holding the tension. Get this out of the way. Then you can fully remove your tools. Now we're going to get our adjuster screw back to its original measurement. We need to go in a bit. You'll feel it once it hits the key, it's going to have a lot more tension. And we're back to 1 3/4 inches. Now once you have this all set up, you can do the same thing for the other side. All right, so now we're up front. We're gonna remove our factory front shocks. Now I do have a floor jack underneath the lower knuckle, because once we remove the lower bolt, it's gonna wanna drop a little bit. It's not gonna do anything drastic, but this is gonna help ease the tension on that lower mounting bolt so we can get it out easier. So our lower bolt is a 21 millimeter bolt with a 21 millimeter nut. So we've got our 21 mil socket and 21 mil wrench to remove the lower bolt, and we're going to use our 21 millimeter wrench to get these top 2 nuts off. So we'll start with our lower mounting bolt first. So we'll get in and get this lower bolt off. Get that nut out of the way. Now you may need to move your jack up a little bit to get the tension off of the lower mounting bolt, or we can also loosen our top nuts, whichever you prefer. Both are going to do the same thing. Just want to pull this bolt fully out. Now we can get our 2 upper mounting nuts off, again with our 21 mil wrench. Now you do have a little harness locator on this stud. You need to push that up and out of the way. You can remove this fender liner. It's not necessary. You can access these nuts without it. You want to support your shock while removing your final nut. You can just pull that right out. And once you have this side off, you can repeat the same process for the other side. All right, so now that we have our front shocks out, the next thing we're gonna need to do is remove our factory upper control arm. So we've got the vehicle lowered down a little bit. I've got a floor jack underneath the lower control arm. That's just gonna help support the weight on our knuckle. Now we still have our tie rod and our sway bar on, and our torsion bar is obviously on, so it's not gonna go too far. We just wanna keep it from doing anything too wild. And then what we're gonna do is remove this bracket so we can have access to our front control arm bolt and get it out. So to do that, we're gonna use our 13 mil socket, pull the bolt out and just move that a little bit out of the way. Pull down a little bit on that. You don't want to yank on it. Just get it sitting a little bit lower and that'll be just fine. Now we're gonna put a bungee cord around the upper part of our knuckle. This is just gonna help keep it in place. You don't want to pinch any lines or anything while doing this. That'll be good right there. Next, we're going to loosen up and remove our nuts for our upper control arm mounting bolts. So we've got a 24 millimeter socket on our ratchet. One thing to note, if this is your first time taking these off, they are very, very tight. You may need a breaker bar as well to get these loose. So we'll get in there and pop those off. Next, we're going to loosen and remove the nuts for our upper control arm mounting bolts. Now we've got a 24 mil socket on our breaker bar. One thing to note, these are very, very highly torqued from the factory, so they are going to be a bit of a struggle to get off. We'll pull back a little bit on our fender liner, this on. Once we've got this broke loose, we'll do the same thing for the front. Now that we have both nuts loosed, we're going to grab our ratchet and fully remove those nuts. Now you can do the same thing for your front nut. Now we can grab our 18 millimeter ratchet wrench and remove our upper ball joint mounting nut. Once you have that off, pull your upper control arm out of your knuckle. Now we can remove our upper two cam bolts for our upper control arm and remove our control arm itself. And once you have this side off, you can do the same thing for the other side. All right guys, now we have our upper control arm and our factory shock off. What we're gonna need to do before we install our new upper control arms is come to our front service perch for our factory upper control arm. Doing this at home, you will need to notch this out to allow for maximum droop of your suspension. Now this won't affect static ride height as much as it will full suspension travel. Say if you're going off-roading or any rougher terrain, you want that full travel. For demonstration purposes, we're not gonna actually cut ours, but I am gonna show you the exact process of how to do it. So you wanna grab a tape measure and a marker and come to your front service perch. Now first you'll need to mark out your lines where you'll need to cut. So what you're gonna do is come to the bolt hole for your brake line bracket. You're gonna take your tape measure, you're gonna measure up a ½ inch from the center of that bolt hole and draw a line straight across to these upright brackets where your perch is. And then you're gonna cut straight down on each side of the perch, cutting those welds out so the top of this perch comes out, and cut straight across that line you made a ½ inch up from your brake line, and then remove that top section of your perch. You want to clean that up and paint over any exposed metal. Now what you'll need to cut this out is either a whiz wheel like so, cutting disc, or a Sawzall, or really whatever you have on hand that will cut metal efficiently, and then clean up your burrs, and your exposed metal needs to be covered or painted afterwards. Now we can begin installing our new upper control arm. Now these are labeled for driver and passenger side. Your passenger is going to be right side, driver is going to be left. So we've got our right side. We'll get this into the factory mounting point, and then we'll install our factory hardware. Now we'll get our hardware lined up. And once you have your rear bolt in, we can install the front bolt, and we'll come back and loosely reinstall our mounting nuts. Now we can loosely reinstall our upper control arm nuts. Now we can install our castle nut and our flat washer onto our upper ball joint mounting stud. Now this should just pretty much fall right in. If you need to raise the knuckle up a little bit, you can use your floor jack, pump that up a hair. We'll get this on. Now we can remove our bungee cord. Now we can come in and tighten down our upper ball joint nut, followed by our upper control arm nuts. So for our upper ball joint nut, we're going to use our 22mm wrench. Now once you have that tight, you want to install your supplied cotter pin. And bend that back over the threads. Now we'll grab our 24mm socket and ratchet and tighten down our upper mounting nuts. And we'll do the same thing for our forward nut. Now we can get our bracket back in place and reinstall our 13mm bolt. Get our locator back in position. And we'll tighten that back down with our 13mm socket. Now once you've got this side all buttoned up, you can do the same thing on the other side, and we'll come back and install our new front shocks. So now we're going to begin installing our front shocks. What we're going to do first is grab our provided spacer, get that lined up on the top of our shock mounts. Then we're going to grab our provided bolts and flat washers, and we'll get those up through the bottom, like so. Now that we have these in position, we're going to get these into our upper mounting points and install our flat washers and lock nuts up top. Now we'll line our upper mounting bolts up, get those through, and we'll install our flat washers and nuts. Now we'll get our lower mounting bolt in position. Again, we're using our factory hardware. Get that lined up. We install our 21 mil nut on the other side. Now we'll bring back our 21 mil socket and 21 mil wrench and tighten these down. Now we use our 19 mil socket and extension and a 19 mil wrench to tighten down our upper mounting bolts. Now once you have this side installed, you can do the same thing for the other side. All right, so now we can begin removing our rear factory shocks. We've got a pole jack underneath our differential to help support it. You're gonna need a 21 millimeter socket and an impact and a 21 millimeter wrench. And for the top mounting bolt, you will need an extension, same tool set. So now we'll remove our lower mounting bolt and with our 21 mil wrench, 21 mil socket. Now for our top bolt, we don't need our wrench, just our socket and extension. You want to support your shock. Remove your bolt, remove your shock. Now once you have this side off, you can repeat the same process for the other side. All right, so now that we have our factory shocks off, we can remove our factory U-bolts to make room for our spacers on the rear end. Now what we're gonna do is we've got a couple pole jacks underneath our differential still. We're gonna loosen one side, which we've already loosened our other side of U-bolts. We're not gonna fully remove them because you wanna keep them kind of caged in. We'll fully remove this side, drop our diff down, add our blocks and our new U-bolts and get that back together. Then you can do the same thing for the other side. So to remove these, we're gonna grab our 27 millimeter socket on our impact and get these off. Sometimes they're a little dirty. Now, once you get your last nut ready to come off, you want to support your cradle. Pop that off. Now we'll remove our factory U-bolts. Now that we have our U-bolts out, we're going to lower this side down enough to get our new lift block in place. Check how we're doing. Now we'll get our block in place. We'll slide it into the factory dowel on our leaf spring. We'll get it lined up on our perch, and we can bring this back up. Now you may have to shift this around a hair to get your dowel on your leaf springs to line up. Now that we have our lift block in place, we're going to install our new U-bolts. We're going to slide into the factory position. Just like so. And we can get our factory cradle back in place. And we'll get our flat washers and lock nuts onto our cradle. Now this is going to drop down a bit. Now that we have our first flat washer and nut on, we'll get the rest on and we'll run this up loosely in place with our differential. So now you may notice that there is a lot of extra threads on these U-bolts. When installing this at home, you definitely want to get your nuts onto a good spot and cut a good portion of this excess off and clean your threads up so you can use a socket so you don't have to use a regular wrench, and also you don't have excess U-bolt hanging down. Now for demonstration purposes, we're not going to trim off our excess, but doing this at home, definitely do that. You can use a cutoff wheel, sawzall, whatever you have on hand to cut metal. Just make sure you clean the end of those threads up at the end so you can get these off if you ever need to. Now once you've got to this point, you want to do the same thing for the other side, then we'll come back and tighten down our nuts for our U-bolts. Now that we have both sides on, we're going to come back and tighten down our U-bolt nuts. Now once again, you definitely want to trim these down so you can use a 27 millimeter socket to tighten these down. Since we're not, we're going to use a 27 millimeter wrench. Now once you have this side tight, you can do the same thing for the other side. Now we're going to get our new shocks in place reusing our factory hardware. So we'll start by hanging the top with our 21 millimeter bolts, and we'll come back and get our bottom bolts in and tighten everything down. Now we'll get our top mounting bolt on. We'll come in and tighten this down, and with our 21 mil socket and extension. Now we'll get our bottom mounting bolt in. reinstall our 21 mil nut, and we'll come back and tighten that down. Now once you have this side on, you can repeat the same process for the other side. Alrighty folks, that about wraps up our review and install of our Cognito Motorsports 3-inch performance control arm leveling lift kit with Fox PS 2.0 IFP Shocks for your 20 to current Silverado 2500 and 3500 HD. Thanks for watching, and as always, for everything Silverado, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.